Okay, again, welcome to week 14 here. We're in the strategy series. This is for intermediates primarily. We've already done a couple of videos on, drag and drop stuff, more how to do these things. Today is going to be more about the strategy, some of the psychology, leave you with some kind of tidbits to take away, and then, go and apply it yourself. So, just two slides to go through here today. Jumped right into it. So the first thing to talk about is the DAR method. This is reflected everywhere. Several different ways, several different approaches how you can tackle this. But the DAR method is dashboard, analysis, reporting. And really you can think about this in any way you want, whether you're structuring in a Qlik application like this, so the dashboard is going to be one sheet, and then maybe you have another sheet for analysis, and then maybe you have a third sheet for reporting. Or maybe you want to stack it all in one very tall vertical sheet, and you kind of want to flow through this dashboard analysis report. Or, another way you could do it too is even identify by your user type. Very common approach there where your dashboard is for your executive level, your C-suite, the people that just want to see, they're going into a meeting, how many things did I do this year? How many things did I do this week? Where am I at right now? And then, your analysis can be a different type of approach. So several different ways to split up the DAR method, but you can really see that as a whole application level. You can even do it as a whole enterprise level. Some people are even using different tools to do different parts. They use different tools for dashboarding, different tools for reporting. So it's important to kind of, again, that's part of the strategy of this. It's deciding where to break and apply this dashboard methodology, the DAR methodology. The picture I have here is Storytelling with Data. This is a great book. I read this in my grad program, and it's a very, very great book. And I'll kind of talk about some of the examples there that they cover in it today, where really the strategy of how to design and workflow the user experience of a dashboard of any chart comes down to the simplicity, the psychology, and letting your users be successful in that. All right, so to round it out here with the slides, get into the fun stuff. Again, it comes back to the audience here. How you structure this, how you, again, coming back to our DAR method. Your DAR can be your executive, your dashboard. Your analysis can be your manager. Your manager's trying to find trends and do more control over the program staff and then report things up to leadership. And then your program staff is who's actually working on it. They're the ones running the numbers. They're the ones working with customers. They're the ones working with vendors. Hey, I need this report out by Friday to go to this person for this rebate. Those are kind of how you want to structure the DAR method. And sequentially, it gives our brains a really good way to compartmentalize which part of the data is important. The same thing that staff thinks are important is not important to an executive and vice versa. So you have to think about what the user needs and how they need to see it, because there's a lot of different ways to convey these messages. And you, as the business analyst or the Qlik developer or the architect, whatever your title is, your role is to portray that data in a way that makes sense for the user's role, not just the way that the data sits. And a great example of that is this Instagram post right here, which I took a screenshot of, and I will tag Chartosaur as a very good Instagram account. I reshare a lot of their stuff. But here they highlight something really simplistic where they show you the data that exists. Very simple table. It's a 3x5. It's a 3x5 table. Just has a couple rows there. And just by showing how much information you can stretch out of that is really important, because so many people live by just looking at that tabular view, taking that alpha and that beta and looking at one dimension. Well, all of these visuals here, they put 6 different visuals here in front of you to show different ways to split up that data. And I think this also kind of subtly hints at that I really enjoy is that the data that's present here, it doesn't have to be, don't have to have millions and millions of rows to make sense of your data. You know, just by looking at any one of these visuals, you can start to make the comparisons between A and between D, or between the alphas and the betas, or between A and B. There's so many different ways to show it, but they all tell they all tell a different story. They're all telling the same outcome, but it's all a different way to get there. And I think that's really important. That's the goal of what I hope everybody can leave with here today is the strategy. It's taking the data that you have, even if it is 5 lines, and it's making it presentable. It's making it appear useful, making it have a good outcome. All right, jumping into the dashboards. All right, so now into the Qlik applications. When you're building anything in Qlik, we're in Qlik Cloud right now. We're going to talk about a couple of these user experience designs, preferences, you know, things like that. So again, for the sake of this demo, we have a very small table loaded in here. I think it's like 20 lines of data, just some sample procedures, the names, the groups, and Medicaid price, you know, just some sample stuff. So we can turn that off. But what we're going to do is just talk about some things, styling, preferences, and again, bring it back to that strategy of how this is all relevant in the DAR method, or where you find yourself in a DAR report. So starting from the beginning, what I like to do with anything is, I'm on a bigger monitor here. I like to make my canvas narrow. It's kind of the first thing right there. Always start with a narrow canvas for me. It's what I'm used to. It's a little bit simpler. Lets me kind of jump right into things. Next thing I do, I like to kind of go with a little wireframe. Before I even know what I'm trying to build, before I even put myself in the user experience, I want to just have a quick way to understand my data, navigate it a little bit. And then once I start to wrap my head around it, I can actually start to work with it. So I'm going to drag a filter pane on, right? I'm going to drag, for the sake of this demo, I'm going to end up with 2 KPIs. I know I want a bar chart. I'm going to move all this around. I want 2 donuts over here. Another little tip for rearranging is that if you hold an object halfway, if you hold it over, the objects will switch. So if I hold this over KPI, they flip. If you hold that object and you hold it towards the side of the new object, it will actually break it in half. And it's kind of nice because you can kind of keep nesting objects into each other like that. And you can kind of make a small little, you know, you can really start to stretch out your canvas and stuff like that. So pretty cool. You can also, if you want to expand something object to the corner of what it can reach out to, if I want this object to expand out to here without clicking and dragging this, I can just double click on that and double click on that. And it stretches out your object for you. Moving on. Line chart. Call that a day for now. So I like to kind of start with a wireframe. You know, again, we're thinking about hierarchy here. Dashboard, analysis, report. So first thing I always do, I do one filter across the top and I load it up with 4 or 5 filters. It's one of my biggest pet peeves when I see people take a filter and then they just copy and paste the filter, and then you have like 10 little box filters up here, and you have to, every time you move around, you got to rearrange them all. We're not doing that. So one filter across the top, you know, we'll pull these KPIs up somewhere reasonable up here. We're going to pull up this bar chart. It's going to be horizontal. And then for now, we'll just start the donuts there and land with something like this. So right away, within 30 seconds, we at least have a nice little wireframe. And the way I like to kind of think through this is it lets someone make their selections. It lets someone see some high level numbers. We're going to see some distributions here over time, or distributions broken out into segments. And then we can see trends over time. So this to me is a dashboard, a little bit on the edge of a report and the analysis side. But say I wanted to do this all in one sheet. You know, the strategy behind that is if you have enough data, enough things to convey, enough users, you can, this be as your dashboard, break this into another one for analysis, another sheet, right? Or, you know, what I see a lot is this isn't a lot of data here. So I would typically extend this sheet down I'm gonna extend it. I like to pull up my objects a little bit here off the bottom, just so that when the user's on here, they see that there's another table down here. And I'm gonna add the old table. It's a little more familiar to me. So really quickly, we can make a quick dashboard here. Procedure code group. We're going to just pretend like the groups are the trends. All right. A table, you get to select the table you want, and boom, get all your fields in here. The downside is that the measures, you do have to bring them back in. So if I want to bring in price Medicaid and commercial, I have to add them here again as a measure. Yeah. Because it doesn't actually recognize that it's a measure. So it's okay. We survive. It at least gets all the dimensions in there for huge tables, which is really nice. All right, so in 2 seconds, we got a dashboard, right? This is easy. You can make this as dense as you want. You can do all these stylings, sure, let's go in. For the people that it's really bothering, I'm going to go ahead and style this, turning off the grid lines. And again, this is kind of the psychology here of what Cole Nassenbaum talks about in her book, is that things need to be simplistic. We need to show the point, not show the data. And this is kind of a good example of that. That bar chart 2 seconds ago was very unappealing. It didn't necessarily have something that I was able to easily portray. It might not have been sorted right. But now, by kind of styling it the way that towards the message that I'm trying to show, I at least give it kind of some strategy there on what I'm trying to give the user. So we'll style this thing. I always bump these line thicknesses up a little bit in styling and make the bar, the line here curvy, just like to give it a standing chance. Some people really don't like these line charts in Qlik right out of the box. And I agree. I think out of the box, they all need a little bit of work. For the bars, for the pie charts, I like going with the donut. The next thing I do, I turn off the dimension label. I go into the styling. I add a small outline, and I usually do like a darker gray and a little bit of rounding. I think something like that is just clean, it's timeless, low aesthetic, it's easy. Another little pro tip you can do here is when you're styling all of your items, what I like to do is add a corner radius. This is kind of like a new thing I like to do, but add a corner radius of 24. So you can style them all. I'm going to copy the style. And somehow I got kicked into 1 second. Turn off touchscreen mode. This is a pro tip. If you didn't know, touchscreen mode is right there. You can turn that off. It just does a quick refresh. This laptop is a touchscreen laptop, so we are gonna reload it here. But what's nice about being able to copy that style, so you copy the style and you can quickly paste it onto anything. So you copy style, paste style. Look at that. And I'll do paste style again. And when I do this, I'll have to reset these. Paste style. Look at that. So boom, right away, in a couple minutes, we got a nice looking dashboard. We got a couple things here that obviously we could touch this up all day, but for having like 19 lines of data, again, that's kind of the point here of today's session. It's a strategy. It's DAR. It's what do you consider your dashboard? What do you consider your analysis? So say my emphasis here, say I want the point of this dashboard, the point of this data set is going to be to focus on what groups have the highest price for, looks like the most variance is commercial. So say that's my new focus now, is finding the highest price for commercial. So what I might do here is, okay, well, let's say I want this bar chart. I might really start up here with my procedures in my groups. So I'm saying, okay, I have 14 procedures. Well, now I really want to focus on this correlation. I might even want to make another KPI that tracks how much money for commercial per group I'm focusing on, or focus on the relationship between them. I also am, now that we've kind of set this goal, I'm having some new ideas, some chart types and some visuals that I want to bring in to show this, right? So we'll leave this alone for now. Again, I'm more focused on my group. So what I'm going to do right away is I'm going to change this to procedure group. Spell it right. And then now I want to change my measure to the commercial rate. Delete that. So boom, right away, our first object is already styled, but this is already giving me a better scope. I've kind of already answered my question that the most expensive group, my highest charging group cost, whatever I'm looking at this data set through this lens, I'm now starting to shift it through that lens, telling that story. Next thing we can do here, forgot to turn off my data label, dimension label, but that's fine. The next thing I'll do here is, again, I can even maybe take this, and maybe this will be my procedure code, but again, I'm gonna take my commercial price and add this onto here. So again, I'm telling that story. I'm now fixing this whole dashboard. Before, I was just using this dashboard to kind of get my hands around what data am I even looking at? What do I have available? What's kind of out here for me to tell the story? So this one's already got this measure set for the pricing commercial. I'm now looking at it by procedure name. Well, one thing that's really going to help me is adding another dimension to group these procedures. So I'm going to add a procedure group. Okay, so now I want to focus, now that I've focused this dashboard on commercial pricing, I want to focus on these procedures, but I want to especially see the group here. So we're going to add the group. That's really going to help me tell the story, kind of point this at. And you always want to have your first bar be your grouping mechanism. That's what's going to put the group, and then the bars is what it's stacked over. So kind of looking a little more detailed here, I'm starting to, as a user, I'm taking a step back. These colors are starting to not make sense to me, right? I'm not seeing any cohesiveness. There's no consistency. What is all this telling me? So now that I know, again, I'm aiming this dashboard around what groups make the most money. Now I'm going to go to my colors on all these objects, and I'm going to color every dimension here by the grouping. So let's do that real fast. Defaults to dimension 1, defaults to dimension 2. That was spoke. Dimension 1, there we go. Do the same thing here, colors, dimension, group, colors, dimension, group. Look at that. Now, the next thing, this is kind of a Qlik thing here too, to notice, is that you might be noticing here how these groups, even though we've colored everything on groups, it's still not staying the same. You know, my red color over here for surgery is not necessarily the same as my surgeries over here. They're purple. So why does that happen? Well, Qlik doesn't really know, unless you go into the master item and you color it that way, it doesn't really know that these are the same things. I've added these, I'm not using a master item. So that's probably for another lesson. You can click persistent colors on here, and then that will fix that, right? So persistent colors, now that I've checked both of these, now my oral surgeries are all purple. So I'm telling more of a cohesive story. My last object down here, before we swap this out, I'll color this one by the procedure group. Well, this one I'd have to do an expression, so let's not worry about that right now. So now that we're kind of telling a better story here, again, where we were at 5 minutes ago with our dashboard around tell us, give us insight onto what groups are making this money, we're already looking much, much better. This commercial pricing is making sense, but let's just finish this thing out, really get it across the finish line. So back to our line here, maybe I want to kind of compare the price of commercial to the price of Medicaid here in this data set. Again, completely mock data, doesn't really matter too much, but we at least have a starting point. So we have a little bit of a comparison here. This would be by kind of by category because we don't have time. And then down here, again, we just have our flat table. So you can see we don't have a ton of data. So now that we're kind of getting into the weeds here, we're starting to tell the story. Again, what am I answering my question? This is where you have to ask yourself as the user, am I answering those high-level questions for the executive? What groups are making the most money? Well, I still think I could get this a little bit home more. It's not jumping out at me. It's not clear. Ideally, I want to see this bar, what would really sell that for me by looking at this instantly, is getting this bar, the highest selling group or the most expensive group should be sorted first. So how are we going to do that? We're going to steal the, we're going to sort our group dimension by an expression. And in Qlik, you have to do it this way when you have two dimensions, but that's okay. So price commercial, descending, and then I like to turn all these other ones off just so you don't get it mixed up. So boom, right away, now that I go full screen, I'm seeing, okay, these are by far my highest selling, my highest cost groups, right? So this to me is answering the question here on the bar chart. I can clearly see all this. I can see it here in a donut percentage-wise, what percentage it makes up. If I had a transaction log, right now we're just counting it by just the outline of what do groups cost. If I wanted to see maybe how many I'm actually doing, I would be counting the number of appointments in here to be able to see the distribution, how many appointments I'm looking at, and so on like that. Same thing with procedure code here. Definitely along with some labels. We didn't talk about labels, but very important there. And then, like everything, think about this as your DAR method. Starting at the top, you have your dashboard, you have kind of your analysis in here. And then down at the bottom, we have our raw data, we have our report. And this is just like the chart-of-sort diagram. We went from, this is all of the data that we're looking at here, all 16 lines of data right in front of us. We've turned it into something that's informational, tells us a story, it gives us hierarchy, it gives us percentages. We have our counts up here. We can filter down into these groups. That's the point of Qlik here, right? Being able to see these things in real time, nice and snappy. So again, thinking about things from this high level view, all the way down to putting yourself in the shoes of, you have to keep asking yourself the question of, what am I trying to answer? What am I trying to tell? What's the story here? And another thing now too, an example, say you really wanted to stretch this out one more time. Okay, one more example here. Let's take the Sankey object, and we are going to, and again, tell this story one step further. Switch these around. And you guessed it, we're going to do the procedure group. We're going to do the procedure name. Actually, we're going to do the procedure name first because that's kind of where it flows from. Procedure name into the procedure group. And then, work here, we can count our procedures, or we can do it on, actually, it's a bad example. We could do it on price. It's commercial. Could do it based on that too. So again, this is another really good way to show this. This works better when you have a couple more dimensions and grouping layers and things like that. But, really quickly be able to get in here and answer these questions from that top-down perspective, that analysis. Depending on how you slice this, this answers some of your questions right out of the gate by looking at this Sankey chart. And that's something that you do have to evaluate your users. Are your users, they have a high skill level here with data literacy, or do they understand what this is actually showing? Do they understand how to use it when they make a selection? Do they understand what they're looking at? So I think we could go on and on all day here about the DAR method, but I think this is a good intro. This is a good crash course. It gets you kind of started, gets you thinking about things that, how to provide transparency and simplicity with complex topics. And a lot of times people lose themselves in these complex data models, and there's so much data, they're trying to display it all. You really have to break it down back to the main question: what story am I trying to tell? You're not trying to show the data, you're trying to show the point of the data, right? And in this case, there's things that you could spruce up here. We could mute all these other colors other than our flagship number here, or we could make this color green and everything else could be gray. So this could really go on and on and on. But again, thinking about answering the question that your users are asking, not showing the data, is what we're focused on today. So thanks for tuning in. Week 14, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.